Okay, greetings everybody. I'm Marguerite Rigoglioso of Seven Sisters Mystery School. And today we're doing something a little different. I am interviewing Angela de la Agua, who is a friend, a colleague, a sister priestess. We have known each other for years now. Angela has came into my world and she became a certified Dove Oracle priestess. She also served as a teaching intern in my Dove Priestess of the Dove Oracle training, and I consider her one of my teachers on so many levels. We wanted to have this conversation about our connectivity with divine birth because Angela has a very interesting story, and this brings the divine birth topic from the past all the way into the present here. So we're going to begin our conversation soon, but I wanted to just say a few more words about Angela. She is the Golden Oracle, and this means she is an initiated priestess in service to helping others access the divinity within each of us. And she does this through heart-opening healing work, ceremony, her own self-care and her modeling of self-care, and her spiritual practice. And she helps others in those regards as well. She draws upon all she has experienced and learned from her awakened path of the divine feminine to really inspire and activate others' lives, helping them to transform with compassion, devotion, and joy. She has been rooted full-time in Joshua Tree, California since 2011 as a devoted initiate of the desert. And that's an interesting story, but she's been embodying her role as a priestess through work as a divine healer, a spiritual teacher, a ceremonialist. She's renowned especially for her work with sacred nourishment, seeing food as a sacrament. She also works ceremonially with fasting and works ceremonially with cacao. She's also a beautiful artist and photographer, and she's somehow able to find beauty in all things, thereby helping her to recognize the divinity that dwells within everything and that allows us to elevate the mundane to the sacred in everyday life. And she follows the path of the open heart as her sacred work continues to evolve and expand. She has a radiant energy that reaches people around the world who seek spiritual guidance, soul level healing, and embodied self-love. And I think you will agree when we start speaking. So welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much, my dear Marguerite. It's so lovely to have this time with you and talk about all things divine.
That's right. Sometimes we get on the phone and we just go on and on. So we thought we would bring some of that inspired conversation to the world public today. So Angela, there are, we were talking beforehand that there are so many things we could talk about. We could delve deeply into the Holy Womb mysteries, the teachings, the systems, the practices, and we might touch on that as part of the divine birth work today. We could talk endlessly about our love of Ish Cacao and our work with Mama Cacao. But today, in that we're focusing on divine birth, why don't you, from that context, talk a little bit about your transformative journey living in the desert, which put you on the priestess path that has eventually led you to touch into divine birth.
Indeed. Well, it's interesting because talking about divine birth altogether, this is my conversation about this with you is literally my virgin talk, my virgin experience of going into this into this territory. So I feel like prefacing all of this with that, like I've never spoken about any of this publicly on this topic. And it's something that I've only really spoken about in any kind of depth with really, really close sisters. So it's just because of my connection with you and my relationship with you, how you brought me into your book. It felt like, okay, well, this feels like a really beautiful moment to activate this and bring it out into the light to be seen. And it just feels like the perfect time, honestly.
Yes,
And
beautiful. And before you go further, let's just preface by saying that the book you're referring to is my book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, Mary and the Lineage of Virgin Births, which has been out for a while now. And yes, Angela, you are featured in one of the very first chapters in there as a contemporary woman who has been walking something of the divine birth path. So yes. So continue about your own transformative journey.
Exactly. And I feel like part of the vision for having this conversation in a public kind of way helps me to even process and integrate why I'm in that book. How did I end up in a book about the mystery tradition of miraculous conception featuring Mother Mary? You know, I'm just like been baffled for ever since you asked me if you could include me in the book. And what an extraordinary honor it has been. And so, yeah, I mean, and so the reason that we're having this conversation, the reason I'm in the book, everything that has put me on this path really does trace back to my coming to the desert to Joshua Tree in 2011, because I have undergone such an extraordinary transformation basically over the course of my life. And up until like basically the first 30 years of my life, I lived in an unawakened state, very asleep, disconnected to myself, to truth, to knowing anything beyond, 3D reality. And so it was a huge shift in my life to be called to the desert. And it was the first time in my life where I was at a point basically where I was ready for a big shift to take place, and enough things in my life were falling apart and not working, that I was paying attention and starting to ask questions and starting to take responsibility for my life in ways that I never had before, and starting to look to myself for things that I had looked externally for up until that point, looking for external validation, looking for love from other people, looking to other people to tell me what to do, and following other people and how they live their lives, and basically always seeking approval outside of myself, in terms of, I'm going to take this job because it makes my dad happy, or I'm going to live in this city because all my friends live there. And so it was a fateful trip to the desert for the first time in my life. It was the first time I had come to Joshua Tree on just like a short little day trip with some friends. And I had always lived just a few hours away from the desert my whole life, but I'd never really been here before. And it was just because I was in such a receptive state. It was the right time in my life. It was such divine guidance that brought me out here, because it changed everything. Just that one day trip out to the desert changed the course of my whole reality. And I could not stop thinking about the desert after that. And within a year after that first visit, I did something that was completely out of character for me. And I left everything that I knew. And I came out to Joshua Tree all by myself. I didn't know a single person who lived out here. I found the sweetest little homestead cabin way out in the middle of nowhere in a very isolated, remote part of Joshua Tree. And I came with my cat at the time, and that was it. And I had no plan. Like I had no plan, I had no idea what I was doing or what I was going to be doing, but all I knew was that my heart was being pulled to live here. And that's the first time in my life. It was notable because it was the first time in my life that I had ever purely followed the guidance of my heart.
Yeah.
And let go of any kind of mental like logic, like nothing about it made sense. And this was before social media was what it was, what it is today. So there was no like Instagram posting about Joshua Tree. It was like there was nothing, there was nobody out here at that time. So it was really a significant departure from LA, where I had been, to moving out here.
Right. And I wanted to say, because I think, some of the people watching this can really identify with what you're saying, although you may have been kind of ahead of our time, ahead of your time. But I've been working with a lot of clients, maybe you have as well, who are going through that now, that
Exactly.
transition where, and, many people in the world are with the events of late, of the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Everybody is in a way being forced to have some kind of shift one way or another, and following not just the nudges, but more like the screams of the universe, whereas you were more following, the nudges and really trusting. So the journey of everyone is requiring a lot of trust right now. So yes, continue.
Definitely. Yeah. The path of the priestess, it was like a lot of us who are in the position we're in right now, where we're helping so many people who are, there's so many people waking up right now, obviously. And so because of all of that, and we've had to go through our initiation process long ago so that we're able to meet everyone where they're at now, and hold
That's
it.
right.
And help bridge what's happening collectively. So, and I feel so deeply blessed that I was asked to be someone who, it could have been a whole different reality if I hadn't come out to the desert, honestly. Like it it still baffles me. I'm just like, how did I have the ability to get out of what I had lived my whole life? Like I knew nothing about the reality I was entering. I had no idea how much my life would change. And it was directly connected in with the way that I live so remotely with no neighbors or anything, just pure solitude, and just this really intimate relationship developing with nature in a way that I had never had before. And that was really fundamental in putting me on this priestess path, and engaging with the elements and developing relationships with plants and the animals. And the desert is such an intense teacher, and you have to surrender to it. You have to. And if you think you're gonna have any sense of control when you come out here, like it won't last. Like you won't last. You'll go back to the city.
Marguerite, she came out, she visited you this summer. She was flattened for 2 days. Forget about going to visit in town. No, she was totally exhausted. It was hot. And that was it. The desert had her way with Marguerite.
Yeah. Also, the first time you ever came out here, you had the classic desert initiation of turning onto a road that isn't a road and getting stuck in sand. And
calling you going, was this the left that you meant? Clearly not. Had to get rescued by the guy with the truck. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like it was just like the right timing in my life where I was surrender and not forcing anything. And I was just listening, deep listening, and receptive to these intense experiences in the desert, and not trying to fight it, and learning how there's so much beauty in these extreme experiences and these intense initiations. And like an example would be like the summer. It's crazy hot. It's not like, I never even liked summer living in Southern California before I moved out here. Like I always just was like, oh, the sun. I don't want to be in. I was so pale before I came to the desert. I had dyed my hair black for 15 years and was like such a fashionista. I come out here, and the desert completely undid me, and I let it, and it was nothing like I didn't really have any expectations, but I also just really had no idea what was coming next. And developing a relationship with the heat was really, really major. And I just didn't have a choice. Like I lived in a place with not a very sufficient cooling system, and loud and noisy, what it is, and didn't work very well. So I was just like, you know what, I just rather sweat and be in silence. And I've been full time in the desert for 11 years now, and I never leave. Like, people who live here full time will like leave in the summer, but I never have really. And so I've gone through these intense initiations of learning the beauty of the heat. And like, there's actually so much magic to this intense summer season out here. That's a long season. And just, you know, finding my way to merge with the energies that are given, you know, and the wind is very intense. And it's like, you know, if you just surrender and accept that whatever's happening around me is going to determine the quality of my present moment, rather than fighting it or trying to get away from it or escape it. There are so many gifts that come from that. And so I just started.
And also, might I add, would you like to mention anything about your fasts?
Yeah, I mean, that was what was really surprising is, I mean, everything that was so formative in my transformational process, just that really kicked in as soon as I started living out here. A lot of it, like, there are things that I never would have dreamed that I'd want to do or detested. Like, again, like the sun was an example. I never liked being in the sun. Fasting started coming into my reality, but that was on the heels of me starting to be drawn into eating really clean foods and eating a raw foods diet. And that was unheard of. Like, I didn't even know what that was. But it was, again, just like once I was put in the right circumstance, in the right environment, my body was just being drawn to certain experiences, and certain things were coming into my field that I'd never heard of before.
And you have done waterless fasts for what, like 5 days in the Mojave?
Yes. So it's like,
that is incredible.
My whole past decade plus out here has been marked extraordinarily by my fasting experiences. And I've fasted on just juices, like just water and juice, for up to 4 months at a time. And I've done that many years in a row, you know, and so I've had a lot of experience with fasting, to the point of, yes, having these vision quest type experiences where I go out into the middle of the desert, like into the boulders where there's so much energy, so much magic, and just, you know, sleep on the earth for 5 days, and I don't have anything. I have no juice, no water, no nothing, no phone, which is more scary to most people than even not having water. and I've done those too. Yeah. I've had those initiations many times over the years, and every single time, even if I do just like a little short 3-day fast or something like that, something significant always comes from it. But I have had significant expansive experiences every time I come off of one of those initiations in that kind of way. And so, yeah.
I mean, there is so much. We want to read your biography at some point. Is there anything else major you'd like to say about this transformative process? Because I'd love for us to move into how divine birth came into awareness.
I mean, I feel like, you know, the way that my way of nourishing myself had so dramatically shifted, and I was starting to really experience myself in a different kind of way, basically. And that kind of naturally attuned me to finally stopping looking outside of myself. Like, I stopped looking outside of myself for external validation in terms of relationship. And that was a really big moment for me. I felt like up until this certain point, which was probably like my first year living out here, always just seeking someone, you know, like wanting to be in relationship always, and not feeling like I could live life on my own by myself. And so it was just really fascinating, because along the way of fasting, you just kind of naturally attune to this really like present time celibate state. And it was really like the first extended fast that I did that I didn't know it was going to turn into how long it was, but I thought I was just going to do a 2-week fast, and it ended up feeling so good that was the first long journey that ended up being 90 days long. And so I was already in this awareness, like when you're fasting, it's about celibacy. It's just about clearing out energies and all of that, purifying the field. And so I just had this, that was really what set in what became another really unexpected shift in my journey, in terms of it set the template for long-term celibacy. Because once I had been 90 days in this really like purified state, I felt so much power. I felt so much love within myself. I felt such a deep connection with myself. And I felt the level of healing that was needed in that area, in that department, so deeply. And so once I came out of it, I had zero desire to seek a relationship or be with anyone in any kind of way. And so that set off what would come to be years long practice of maintaining celibacy. And that's been totally shocking to me, honestly. I never would have guessed that would be my path.
And, you know, I want to bring in some of Mother Mary and the Essenes here, because I remember that when you and I were in the Mother Mary, the Holy Womb Chakra System class that Cindy taught, and we both went into like the day 4 where she talked about Mother Mary. You had served us cacao, the several of us priestesses who were in there, and we all had our minds and hearts open. We didn't really know that this was what cacao was. And I started realizing, and I told you this, I was like, Angela, I see you in the desert with Jesus. You were in the desert. You were in Essene. You were walking with sandals and, you know, things like that. So I feel your connection with the Essenes through who are this holy order that predates, as it's coming to, you know, as we're coming to discover, predates the Holy Family. Really, you know, they're an ancient lineage from basically star beings that came to this planet to bring these teachings of the heart and of consciousness and so forth. And so I feel and sense that you have these past lives as an Essene, as this sacred holy woman, healer being, and with the Essenes would have gone along celibacy and fasting. In fact, they are renowned for eating basically, you know, just a very nutritious bread. And sometimes they would have hyssop, well, you know, an herb to go with it. But it feels like you are remembering all of that. And the women were equal with the men in those Essene orders and so forth. So I just find that aspect of your life fascinating, because come to find out that the women who, it was really through you and your fasting practice, that when I was exploring about Mother Mary and they were talking about her diet, you know, in the infancy gospel that I look at, I put 2 and 2 together and I was like, oh my gosh, they had specialized, very lean diets, probably with a lot of fasting. And maybe they were breatharians even, you know, living on that kind of prana. So when I understood your lifetime and this lifetime and your lifestyle and your connections with divine birth that we're going to talk about even more, I realized, oh my gosh, these women were fasting as a way of life, not because they were anorexic, but because they knew how to nourish themselves in other ways, like you do with the sun and the air and the prana and so forth. And you also mentioned something really interesting to me about the cessation of the menstrual flow, when that happens, as not being a sign of pathology or something wrong with your body, but rather the fact that it's not needed. I'm wondering if you can maybe explain a little bit more about what does the fasting do and why is the menstruation then not needed?
Well, first of all, I have been having chills up and down my spine as you're talking about the Essenes. in terms of the fasting, I mean, it's a state where the body is clearing what's not serving the body. It's releasing. It's a massive state of releasing. And so, and that's what the moon cycle is. The womb is shedding, it's shedding what it's a huge, powerful, potent time of releasing on every month, every 28 days or so. And so if you're in this already like huge experience, the whole body is going through this experience of massive release for an extended period of time. The womb, it's like there's nothing to shed is kind of how I experience it. Like there's nothing left to shed in me and during these periods. And it only happens when it's extended fasting. So, and I had gone, when I was really maintaining these longer practices, annually. I don't do it so much anymore on that level. But when I would do like 3-4 months at a time, once a year of fasting, I would go without my cycle for up to 8 months after that, and so when you start eating and taking in fats and things, it's going to start, and it always, she always comes back. So I've never intuitively, it's never felt like anything's wrong. And that's where women's minds go, as soon as like, oh, you don't have your cycle, there's something wrong there. And it's just like, no, it's just a whole different state of reality, actually.
And I came to realize these divine birth priestesses were detached from the purification cycle as well as the lunar cycle that menstruation was originally connected with, where you would ovulate with the full moon and menstruate with the new moon in the absence of artificial light in indigenous cultures. But the women who were practicing divine birth got detached from that lunar sort of control over their bodies, which I think is a very interesting thing. And I discerned that opened them up to the connectivity with the star realms quite a bit more. And also Raymond Bernard, who's this sort of mystical, mysterious writer, who's no longer, on the earth plane, but he wrote a book called Mysteries of Human Reproduction. And in that and a couple of other things he wrote, he said that he ran into a shaman named, I think it was Pataya, something like that, in South America. And she said that, virgin birth was possible. And what was important was for the woman wearing loose clothing. So there was no constriction of energy on the holy womb chakra. And they ate only vegetables, like very purified diet, right? So those were some of the things, and they would end up ceasing menstruating. So he was a big proponent of having women naturally get to the point where they didn't need to menstruate anymore. So I brought in some of those things when I mentioned you in the book, in my book, but let's go more directly into how divine birth came into your life.
Definitely. So, yes. So I'll just say, leading up to this, I have never had any kind of pull to have children. Like never been called to be a mother. So I've never had that kind of, just that desire to have a child in me as a predominant, like I must have a child, kind of thing. It's never been present. So it made it all the more notable when I had this experience, because I was basically at this women's gathering in the desert, and it was something where I was immersed in this field of powerful feminine energy for days on end. And it kind of culminated in this experience in a tent, or like a teepee kind of bell tent. And an elder was speaking, and she was addressing like a small group of us that were gathered in the tent. And she was giving some brilliant teaching on something. I don't remember what it was, but all I know is that she made an off-the-cuff remark that didn't really connect in with what else she was talking about. And it was just something she literally turned her head to the side and just said a single sentence, like a string of words came out of her mouth. And it felt like I could see the energy of the words travel through the bell tent, and they made this arc through the air, and they landed right on my head is how it felt. It just felt And then she went back to whatever she was focused on speaking on. And I don't remember what she said, but what she said, what I understood and what I received in that moment was that it was possible for a woman to conceive a child without a man being involved, and that it had to do with vibration. And she didn't say it that explicitly, but that was exactly what she was saying. And I just remembered looking at her like something had just completely awakened in me in that moment. And I was just staring at her, like peering into her, like, what did you just say? And like wanting her to like go back into that, but it wasn't what it was about. That it didn't even matter, because in that moment, it was just about me having this experience of being activated with that knowledge.
Wow.
And I also have never had a relationship with Mother Mary. I've never, felt any kind of intimate connection with that story of the virgin birth and all of that. Like I was raised in a way where like a kind of casual Christian upbringing, like I was aware of it, and I like, sure, okay, great, the miracle story of the birth of Jesus, that's fine, but I had no energy around it. Like It was just,
Most people don't.
So
I think by design, the powers that be did not want people to look too much at that story, because then we'd start getting into what was actually going on for Mary.
It was amazing because it's like, then my mind immediately went to her, and it was just like, oh my goodness, like Mother Mary, like what Mother Mary did is not unique to Mother Mary. And it was like,
okay, I had the same downpour. Who knows what year? I know my year was January 2001. So I'm not sure what year that.
It was, I do remember it was 2014. It was 2014, because after that, like that was all that happened, but it was just like something fundamentally changed in me in that moment, and something lit up in me. And later, like a week or two later, once I was back home with internet connection, I remembered about it. And I was just like, what do you do when you have a divine experience or a mystical experience that you can't explain? You go to the Google Oracle and you're like, what was this experience? I need to know more. And so I remember, like, it was like in the middle of the night one night, and I just went to Google, and I'm not even sure what I started searching, but I was just looking for more information about what I know. I was not calling it divine birth, but I was just maybe looking up immaculate conception, just like trying to find something of substance. And eventually I came across, in those searches, I stumbled upon the word parthenogenesis, and I couldn't find anything that satisfied what I was seeking, except for two links. And one link was your website.
Seven Sisters Mystery School.
Seven Sisters Mystery School revealed herself to me in that night. Wow. And I saw these two books by this beautiful, powerful priestess who was Marguerite, and just seeing the titles of your books, just like
the Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece. Yes. And then Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity.
Yeah. And I was just like, okay, this is the gold mine. This is the gold mine. There are books on this, and this is what I'm looking for. Wow. And there was one other link. And so for your website, it was like, okay, I'm subscribing to this mailing list, and I'm putting these books in my Amazon cart kind of thing. And but this other second link,
they were not cheap in those days.
No, and so they were not. They were actually very expensive. And so
I know we've since gotten the price down on those.
Yeah, no, but that was actually key, because I'm like, okay, they're in my cart, but I'm not actually checking out right now. And I ended up never buying them, but it was more like, I just needed to know that they were there. And then from that point forward, I was on your list, and I was directly connected with you and your work. Yeah. But the other link that I found that same night was the link for Den Poitras's article about Laurie. And at that time, I had no idea that his article and you were even connected.
I know, because he had found me after my work came out. And we met in Massachusetts. I was still in California at the time. I know it's astounding what he's written in his own book now, Parthenogenesis, his long lost ability to self-conceive. So we became long-term friends. Since then. Yeah.
So I found like the only sources on this information that I was looking for. But didn't even know what I was looking for. But once I found it, I'm like, this is what it is. This is what I'm being called to learn about. And so with that piece, that was really major, that article, because that was something I could read immediately. It was just posted online, right? So I read his long article about his journey with Laurie.
Yes.
And
let's reference Laurie. Maybe you could tell a little bit about Laurie.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's a woman who, when I was reading her story through the lens of Den and his friendship with her, she was this very spiritual, solitary woman who was very connected in with her guidance and with the angels, and lived in close connection with nature and the earth. And she didn't really eat food. She fasted, and she was celibate, and she was tall and blonde. And I was just like, every little bit of information. And she eventually got a message that she, from the angels, from her guides, that she had conceived a divine child.
On December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1976. Yeah.
So, and I'm getting chills, hearing you speak to it as well. Like, and so I'm reading this article, and I'm reading it thinking, I'm reading my life story here. Like, this is the life that I'm living in the desert. And I feel like I'm all out on my own, living in a really peculiar, specific kind of way. And I don't even know why, I'm just following guidance. And I don't, there's no why or like reason for any of it. Like any of it really, like the celibacy, the fasting, the solitude, all of it has just been because I'm guided to do the things, I don't have I've never had a set plan about what I'm trying to achieve or whatever. It was just the life that presented itself to me and that deeply resonated with me. And it was absolutely the remembrance, like living out here helped me tap into the past lives as an Essene. And I'm sure there was more than one, because it's all come so, like, as soon as I've been exposed to any of it, I just like, it's an immediate, like, okay, like it's received and embodied. And it just, to even learn about the Essenes and understand them over the years, it's just like, it's like so obvious, it's so obvious.
Yes.
Part of my past life history, more than one life, definitely.
Let's add, Angela, that, and I talk about this in one of the chapters in my book, particularly about grandmother Anne, who was Mary's mother, who divinely conceived Mary without a male. And right, so few people know about that, but I discern in some of the characteristics of what Anne's about and what she does, that she was an Essene. And specifically on like the academic level, I'm able to connect her with the Therapeutae, a particular grouping of them and what they were all about. But that leads me into the ancient writer, and I'm thinking it's Josephus. It's either Josephus, no, Philo. Mm-hmm. He's the one who talks about the Essenes. Mm-hmm. Well, what does he say? He says that elsewhere, he talks about the four matriarchs of the Hebrew tradition, like Sarah, Zipporah, Rachel and Leah, that basically what he is saying is that these women were divine birth priestesses. That's how I interpret, and that celibacy was an important part, or returning to some level of celibacy was important for them. And that he hints at what, I and Savina Tubel really talk openly about, that these women who supposedly had husbands like Mary and Joseph and Anne and Joachim and Sarah and Abraham, that these were really energetic partnerships, but they weren't conjugal partnerships, because these men held the women as divine birth priestesses and respected their celibacy, which may have only been broken in ceremonial occasions or whatever. So that really does all correspond with Philo's mystical understanding of these ancient Jewish women, essentially, which at least down in that part of West Asia, North Africa, is what the Essenes are thought to be. And it could well be that this lineage just predates even the Judaic tradition, really. But did you want to say anything more about your practices and how how you started understanding them as related to divine birth? And where did this lead you? Where did this lead you around divine birth, and where is this leading you today?
Right. So, it was like, once I had that experience of reading that article about Laurie specifically, it felt again like it was a whole nother level of remembrance that was awakened in me. And I remember crying when I was reading it, because it felt like, oh my word, like there's actually maybe a greater purpose to the way that I live my life. Like this is major. This is highly significant, and everything about it resonated with me. Yeah. And so it put everything into a different kind of context, and it fueled already what was in place all the more with this sense of divine mission, like, okay, I have a role to fulfill here. Like I'm being initiated in this lineage of divine birth, like, and I don't even know it, but now it's been revealed to me, and it felt like these pieces of my life just coming together, and in a really profound way. And so it made me feel all the more committed to what I was already immersed in, more steadfast, and especially around the celibacy piece. It was just like, this is like for me, just like such an awesome way of being. Like, yeah, I'm so in it. Like, I'm so like feeling it. And especially if this is what possibly might be the purpose behind it, I'm all for that. And again, because I had never even cared about giving birth to a child at all up until all of this, that like rearranged my energy. It again awakened something in me where I felt like I don't care about having a child, but to give birth to a divine child who is someone who needs to come onto the planet in service to humanity, to help raise up humanity's consciousness, to awaken and expand, and bring healing to the planet. Like, whoa, like that's a whole reframe. That's a major reframe on why any woman could would want to give birth. And that really, it just really, really moved me to think in that context of giving birth with that kind of intention. So something was deeply inspired in me, but at the same time, it's incredibly, as you know, so deeply mysterious. And it's not like there's any kind of rule book or directions on how to give divine birth or conceive divinely necessarily, right? So it's all hidden and coded, and so I felt like all I had at that time was just knowing, and it was enough. And so I didn't feel like I needed to go out into the world and figure it out, kind of thing, because everything had already come to me so divinely and without any kind of force or pushing. And so, I just kind of carried on as I was, but it helped me stay engaged with you. And ultimately, I remember it was the first time that I ever directly connected with you was when you launched your very first Oracle Priestess program, your training program for that. And I had never done anything like that before. I had always, in my years in the desert, I was a student of the desert. Like I didn't have teachers, I didn't have mentors or anything like that. So my spiritual path was a very solitary experience, but the Oracle training was also tapping into remembrances of me as an oracle. It was all happening at the same time, like the divine birth awareness oracle, past lives awareness, being at Delphi, that was all coming through simultaneously. So when I saw that you had created this groundbreaking new program for oracle priestess training, I was just like, oh my word, she made this for me. Like, and so that just became the focus then, was like, let me really step into this new kind of identity of an oracle priestess. And I hadn't used that languaging of priestess really before. And it all just, again, it was remembering, like, oh, this is all familiar. I know what this is. And I didn't know it until it was presented to me. So.
And also, Angela, so, as I've written about in my first 2 books, and I kind of mentioned in the Mary book, the oracles, the major oracle centers, originally, what I researched was that they were also divine birth centers. So the 2 functions, and you see that in the names and the children, the names of the priestesses, what they were about, what happened to them and their children, and how they were born divinely. Sometimes these were through interdimensional intercourses, but it was not human intercourse. So these were places where the women did conceive and raise each other's children. So you were just remembering and weaving all of that together in your own life.
Yeah, exactly.
So where are you with it all today?
Well,
where has this led you?
I mean, at this point, it's been since 2014, and we're like 8 years later, and I haven't divinely conceived the next avatar. But it's like, again, all these years, I haven't actively attempted or tried. It's part of what was divinely received along the way, though, were the Holy Womb Chakra teachings, where that felt like a huge piece in terms of our actual practices for divine conception. That was a big piece that came in. It felt like reassuring.
Tell everybody a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So with Marguerite, we were initiated into the Holy Womb Chakra teachings together at their ashram in Northern California, and it was like this whole mysterious thing. Like, we didn't even know what we were getting ourselves into. We're just like, let's learn about the womb chakra, and it was not.
Drive up to Laytonville, and you're referring to the Divine Mother Center, of course.
Divine Mother Center, as it's called now, Divine Mother Center. Yeah. But we were like, priestesses out of, it was like so out of context. Like, we had no idea what it was like a whole lineage around the practice of purifying the womb chakra, and like that the womb chakra was a divine portal, basically, for the ability to really embody divine energy, to be an embodiment of Divine Mother, to be an embodiment of divine love, and to access that level of miracle creation energy. And so within these practices for purifying the womb chakra, there's also all of these specific practices for sacred pregnancy. And it's not like they give the practices with that intention, like, oh, a woman can conceive on her own. It's not like that, but it's like, but you just like, when you have the information that we have, and you see and you receive something like that, it's like, oh, this is a huge piece here. Like, I just had nothing before. Now I've got like ancient mantras that were used to conceive Jesus, that Mother Mary chanted. I think this is a significant piece.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And Sri Kaleshwar, the saint who brought in these teachings from these ancient palm leaf manuscripts, originally from the Saptarishis, the 7 world sages, and then originally really from Divine Mother, as Cindy Lindsay will agree. He gives us the 2 mantra process for a couple to engage in sacred union to have a child. And then elsewhere, he talks about how Parvati and others were able to divinely conceive, Ganesha and so forth. He doesn't, and Mother Mary conceiving Jesus, he doesn't put them together. So he doesn't ever give the formula exactly for how Mother Mary would have conceived Jesus, or how you know, Parvati would have conceived Ganesh, but he sort of hints around and he puts a lot of stuff out on the table. And I've always had the feeling that that's because it was for us to sort of put it together, or it was for oracle priestesses to pull it back out of the Akashic records. And I have this sense, Angela, that whether or not you ever could divinely conceive, you are pulling in and radiating energies in a template so that potentially the next generation can do that. Because when I started to get this information back in, 2001, I was basically told it was going to be several generations, something like akin to 35 years, before there would be enough energies and codings on the planet to actually be able to do it appropriately so that the children could live and be safe, because Laurie's child only lived 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's another child that I know of in Mexico that only lived 3 years. And, so it's not quite the right time, but it feels like one way or another to me, you're doing critical, essential work to help set this template on the planet again.
Yeah.
For sovereign birthing.
I totally agree. And that's kind of what my journey has been in terms of like those practices. Again, they came in without me seeking them. Like we had no idea that we would be learning about sacred ancient mantras dealing with conceiving a divine child when we go to this workshop. It's like trusting that the information comes as it's needed. And what I've gone through these different cycles over the years where, I've kind of moved through intensity around it, like feeling like I'm here for this purpose. And I've really let go of any kind of expectation of outcome. It's kind of like I agree and resonate with how you're describing it. Like I'm here to play a role on some level, and it might not be to physically divinely birth a child. In many ways, that's a limiting way of looking at it all, And so I feel like we're in very extraordinary times where even what we feel we are seeking, or what like a desired even divine outcome might look like, is limiting. Like there's so much beyond our capacity to even know like what's possible. So I hold it lightly now. It's like especially with the inclusion of in your book, like it kind of reignited that, like, yes, like I'm in this book with Mother Mary now. Like I've been called out as someone who's potentially part of this lineage, and I've never said anything about it. I've never shared about it in any kind of public way that I'm in this book, which has been out now for a year. Yeah. And so it's been this tucked away little aspect of me. And I think there's a lot more ease and flow around the path if I am able to just be transparent about it, for starters, and give more like really just beautiful energy around it. Just like it could be this and it could be something else. And I think that there's something powerful in terms of holding it lightly and just being open and receptive to the potential path, like where it takes me, as I continue to just find such deep resonance with all of it, and reading your book, it again, like it just took me to another place, just kind of like, yeah, like reaffirming, like there's something significant that I'm doing, and I don't, maybe it's not going to have a tangible, visible result in the world, that people can be like, oh, she did this for divine birth. It doesn't even matter. It's like, I know that a way that you've presented this kind of ability is also that we are able to divinely birth ourselves,
That's right.
And that's essentially what I think is the bigger work that is almost, it's on the same level, if not even more extraordinary. And if we are able to come into that knowing for ourselves, to be able to rebirth who we are into the recognition that we truly are divine beings.
That's right.
That we truly are embodiments of the divine. We all are that, that is what changes the world. If we're able to know that about ourselves and feel it and embody it, And if we are able to meet every single person we come in contact with and see it in them too.
That's right. That's right. And, you know, it sort of makes the need for divine birth go by the wayside in a way, because if we can all self-avatar, right? If we can all raise ourselves up to our original divine human blueprint, which is what all the major spiritual teachers are saying right now, then we will have accomplished divine birth in our lifetimes. And you know, I think divine birth came on the planet as a technology when all of that was starting to dissolve and go away, when the veils between the realms was becoming thicker, and we were no longer accessing divine source. We were no longer operating and acting in those elevated ways, and the degeneration was continuing on and on. So of course, every once in a while, boom, you have to have an avatar come onto the planet and write things up and, you know, get the spiral going up. And that's why we have these recurring avatars, divinely born people come to the planet like Jesus and so forth. But we want everybody to be divinely born. So yes, it feels like you and I are part of that, because everything else you're doing, Angela, is really supporting that. And you certainly are a cornucopia of birthing of other things. Your teachings about cacao, your teachings about intuition, your teachings about the mantras and those systems. And would you like to say more about some of the things that you've been birthing from your cornucopia?
I mean, you know, it's like, I find that that kind of awareness, so like divinely rebirthing ourselves, you know, in way more empowering too. I think I'm feeling something like really, really powerful around that. And that even this concept, or even the reality of divinely birthing an avatar, is a beautiful, amazing, you know, thing, of course, but it also it's something that I'm finding myself like have more and more sensitivity towards, is where we try, or where we put our energy or our focus on someone else saving the world, you know. And
That's right.
It's like
the priest or priestess caste, you know, or these holy people are somehow going to do it instead of.
It's like, no, bring it inward, because we're the ones, like we each are that. Yes. And again, like it just feels like that's where the true empowerment is, and the true rising up and into like truly being divine beings is in our ability to be conscious of it and live our lives in that way. And so it's interesting because again, like it's all just kind of naturally presented itself to me over the years, but everything that I do in service in my work with others is something that I've naturally, like, that is something I do for myself. You know, it's something that I've experienced myself. And most of the time I don't even dream of whatever the thing is. Like cacao is a good example. I just, you know, she came into my reality, and it was just a private, intimate thing. And I never dreamed that I'd be sharing her in ceremonies or publicly in any kind of way at all. But everything is like so supported and so clear, you know, as the path evolves. And what's consistent, the consistent underlying energetic with everything is love. Like everything is about helping people to access the true love within. And it's all work oriented around helping people learn how to love themselves more, and how to I like to call it now, like I've kind of evolved into describing my path as the path of the open heart, because that's really where it all began for me. Was I opened my heart, heard the call of the desert, and never looked back. Like it's always been about that. Like, let me just tune in, like, and make choices in my life that have nothing to do with what my mind is telling me is the best thing to do, or trying to like, you know, figure things out. Like, I'm just going to figure it out kind of thing. It's just like, no, you're not. You're never going to figure it out. You're going to feel it out. You're going to feel it out. You're going to pay attention to what the heart is guiding you into, and trusting that. And my goodness, that's the most empowering thing in the world, is when you can totally trust what's happening the heart space,
Yeah.
and let that guide the way. And
It's the biggie.
yeah, it is. And that love, that ability to love ourselves, and recognize ourselves as embodiments of the divine, of Divine Mother. That's, again, like, that's where it's at in terms of bringing real change and transformation to the collective and to the planet.
Yes.
And yeah.
Wow. So in our last few minutes here, why don't you tell people specifically about what are some of the offerings and how can people find you?
Yeah, I am found on my website, angeladelaagua.com. And I work one-on-one with people. I offer what I call guiding light mentorship, and that helps kind of access exactly what I've been talking about, how to access that love within, and how to navigate life in a way where you are inherently connected to the sacred in all things, and how to bring self-care into your life as a ritual every day. Things like that. And I also do womb chakra healing. I'm a healer in the lineage of Sri Kaleshwar. And so I offer those healing services, and a lot of ceremony too. So I offer ceremony remotely and in person. Sometimes, and working with cacao as the ceremony guide, and yeah, cacao apprenticeships and lots of lovely things on my website. So, and I'm actually starting to move into having more in-person experiences, and having beautiful, expansive retreats with people where we can really dive deep together into sacred nourishment and daily life as ceremony, and meditation and mantras and all of it. So
Sounds beautiful. Yeah. Wow. I'm driving back over. Okay. Any final things that you'd like to say?
Well, I want to say I am so grateful for you. And, you've been so key in my path, and in terms of learning more about myself and helping me come into my own power in so many ways. And I'm just ever grateful to you. And for you just seeing me, again, I can't even express the deep honor and blessing it's been to be part of such an extraordinary book. It's really an important work in the world. And I'm just so grateful. And I just hope that what was communicated and experienced between the two of us today on this video transmission is a transmission of love.
Yeah.
And that it really it serves to radiate some powerful healing energy into the world.
Blessed be. Undoubtedly it has. I'm delighted to be here with you in sisterhood on that. And yes, I mean, you are, I have just watched you. I mean, I always had ultimate respect for you, and I have watched you develop and transform over the years, and really, truly come into your own, as a sister. And it's the lines between student and teacher blurred and got, dissolved long ago. So that's not even the point here, but just to truly honor who you've become, and also where you're going, and the importance of what you're bringing. I mean, I know I benefit personally, and I know that there are many others who have and who will be benefiting from all that you have to offer as we unfold on this planet and this exciting ride we're all on.
Indeed.
Yes. All right, everybody. Well, you can find Angela at angeladelaagua.com. You can find me at 7sistersmysteryschool.com. And we thank you all for watching, and we will say goodbye for now. Many blessings to you on your path.
Thank you so much.